Confuse me there.
Oh, apologies. Yes, I have gone on to the next site. I'm really sorry about that.
Site with Lidl at the front,
Yes,
isn't it? And the car park
yes.
to the right.
Sorry. Yes. Um, if I rewind. Yes, so this site is essentially the Lidl and its associated car parking to the rear. And then there is also a small employment use as well on the site. So in two ownerships, essentially. Um, Again, the density assumptions that we apply: town centre, urban, PTEL4, 75% residential, 5% employment, 20% main town centre uses, so 125 net residential units, just over 500 square metres of employment floor space to essentially make sure that that employment floor space that's there at the moment is re-provided, and then the main town centre floor space, which accounts for primarily the relocation of the re-provision of the Lidl on the site. Again, we're responding to the London Plan Policy H1, which talks about low density retail and its corresponding parking spaces.
Has there been any contact with Lidl on the site?
We haven't had any direct correspondence with Lidl in terms of their redevelopment plans.
So the site's in two ownerships. Do Lidl own the car park to the rear, the whole car park?
Yes.
And the employment use, do they just own the building itself?
Yes, that's correct. I think there's direct access from Sydenham Hill Road. There's a small employment shed essentially and a yard space to the front.
So potentially, given the area of car parking, there could be potential to have a temporary store, albeit there is a change in levels between the two car parks, I think, aren't there?
Yes, agreed. I mean, whilst there's no plans on the table in terms of phasing, we did think that a temporary store you would be able to have a temporary store on one of the car parks and then redevelop the site and intensify that way.
So I think this side is shown as beyond 15 years, which is what made me wonder whether we're talking about the same site actually. Presumably due to lack of contact and with the landowner on the site.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And would this be a site that the council foresees in year 16 potentially?
I think so. Again, it's sort of, again, it's quite difficult to predict because we know that there is interest from supermarkets generally and Lidl more broadly in London to develop more urban stores with residential above. They do have a program of um, or a kind of general approach now to intensifying their stores, albeit we haven't had any direct response from Lidl on this site. But I think we've taken a cautious approach.
Can I also just mention that through the landowners survey, the shop directly adjacent to Lidl had come forward suggesting that they didn't want to redevelop the site, so we've removed them from the boundary. And also we did have a larger site at the bottom end of the site, which included some residential uses. And once again, they did come forward and say they didn't want to be involved. So we have amended the boundary to the developable area.
And being within the town centre, is within an archaeological priority area, how would the council normally approach that, and how could that potentially sort of restrict development or delay development?
So that would be assessed through the development management process. It would be flagged up at an early stage when the case officer was dealing with that. There would have to be some initial investigation and assessment from the landowner coming forward. There are particular areas and particular points of interest within the borough. I'm not aware of this being a particularly sensitive area, but given that it's an EPA, it would have to be assessed through the DM process.
And in terms of how the council sees the site coming forward, would the council see development on the whole site? So there would be no areas of sort of car parking left over, for example. Be quite a comprehensive development of the site.
Yeah, given the PTAL again, and in relation to the London plan, the starting point would be car free. Now, we know that inevitably there will be a conversation through the development management process with the supermarket owner around about an appropriate level or provision of replacement car parking, and we'd end up with a compromise position. Whether that's surface level car park, I would suggest not. It would probably be, structured car parking in terms of a podium level with development above, etc.
And in terms of the potential access or any highways constraints, I guess if it's car free, that would alleviate concerns. But if there were to be some podium parking, then there would need to be some access to the site.
Yes, and I would imagine that the existing access from Girton Road would be used for that access and for any kind of servicing access that's required, which is currently provided on the site.
So with these sites, is there a hope that once the site's allocated, that would help to develop, to generate interest in the site coming forward? Sort of a little bit of a leap of faith in some ways.
Yes, yes. We are hoping, and through the conversations that we've had with our development partners, a site allocation does provide a degree of certainty, and particularly with developers seeking effectively deals with landowners. The site allocation provides them that with the basis then to approach landowners to see if they are interested. So that would be our hope. With the supermarkets, I think there's a more proactive role that the council needs to take in that regard, and effectively engaging with the supermarkets in a more proactive way to ensure that those come forward.
Okay, thank you. Any modifications?
There are no modifications for this site.
Okay, thank you. We're flying through these. LWA 12, 113 to 157 Sydenham Road. Now's your opportunity.
Yes, the site has a rather nice beer garden. Um, I think I sort of talked about the nature of the site. Obviously, there is a number of high street properties which are in active use, which we would want to retain, but there is also a number of uses on the site, car dealerships, etc., which are either vacant kind of parking lots or display areas for cars which are not being used, or larger car parking areas to the back of the properties, which we believe that could be rationalised. There are obviously some employment uses within there that we'd want to retain or re-provide, but we definitely think there is, and in relation to the London plan policy, there's definitely an opportunity here to intensify the site and provide much needed housing within the area. So we've looked at the kind of a similar density assumption, PTEL4, town centre, urban, 260 dwellings per hectare, roughly the same mix, although we've included 10% employment in this site, given existing employment uses. So that equates to 157 net residential units, just over 1,500 gross employment floor space, and then 3,000 gross main town centre floor space, albeit some of that town centre use is already in use with the pub and the high street properties.
So the council would look to retain the existing buildings on the frontage, is that right?
I think so. The majority of those, yes.
It's interesting looking at the timing of the site, years 1115, compared to the previous site, which was post 15 years, given that the previous site was in 2 land ownerships, whereas this is probably a more complex site in many ways. I was just wondering why how the council sees the site coming forward. Has there been any contact with landowners? And, what's the basis for the site being in years 11 to 15, given the complexity of the site?
I think what Angela has just said there is that we have phased the existing site allocations ahead of. So this was an existing site allocation within the local plan 2013, ahead of, just as a general principle, ahead of new site allocations. But the inspectors are correct. There isn't any. We haven't had the kind of contact as of yet from the landowners. So there is a question about whether or not that should slip back to the later on in the year, albeit it is within the last third of the plan period.
I guess how does the council see the site coming forward, given the multiple land ownerships in the area? And obviously, if it has been an existing allocation and there hasn't been any interest in the site to date, it does raise a question mark in terms of the landowner interest to bring the site forward.
I think it's a fair question. I mean, again, what I would say is that there is change happening within Lewisham and within London in terms of intensifying and intensifying these particular sites. and the general need for housing. But also, as I said before, there are other developments, windfall developments happening within this particular area, which suggests to us that there is certainly development interest, and also that values are at a point where these developments are probably more attractive propositions. Again, I think the reallocation of the site would send a signal to the market that essentially we are looking to encourage redevelopment on the site, and you know, hopefully we could get a developer or landowner interested in delivering this.
And in terms of just looking at the range of uses, the car sales area and the forecourt area, which is obviously quite low intensity, so that would seem to be appropriate sort of area of the site to intensify development. The pub would probably be retained, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
With the uses, and then we have the enterprise and the sort of car valeting kind of business, which would probably lend themselves to being redeveloped potentially.
Indeed, yes. And there are some, I mean, on the high street, there's a kind of mix of uses and units, some of which have accommodation above them, some are single story. So again, there'd be an assessment of, or some of those single story retail units could be redeveloped in the future to provide intensification, and others which you know, have accommodation above them might not. But again, that would be very much in terms of the led by the market, really. It might be that some areas of the site are more or are easier to develop, and maybe the trajectory needs to reflect that in terms of the phasing of that delivery.
Yeah, I could see those areas that I mentioned potentially coming forward in advance of sort of more discrete uses. But it does strike me that a master plan covering the whole site would be helpful in terms of just having a vision, if you like, for how the site's going to be developed. Would you envisage a developer providing that master plan as opposed to the council?
I think that would be the case, yes, on this particular site and also the Lidl site. Yes, I think it would be we'd be looking at a kind of developer-led master plan, obviously with conversations happening with the other landowners.
Just looking at the trajectory, it does seem to be phased. The 53, R11, 52, and then 52.
Yes, yes, it does. Sorry.
Any concerns in terms of viability?
No immediate concerns. Obviously, as we've discussed, it's quite a site with a lot of different uses, and some will be more viable than others. But in terms of the the sort of testing, we've looked at the typology 13 in terms of mixed use, which again, depending on the sales value and the proportion of affordable housing, suggests that there are a range of options that could be viable. But as I said, there may be some elements and some site ownerships which are more viable than others.
Just also to mention that in terms of viability, schemes are coming forward in the local area. I think just almost opposite that site, site 154 to 158 Sydenham Road, that has just been completed for 33 units in the last year or so.
Okay, so quite a buoyant area in terms of land values. Any modifications?
Yes, there is a single modification. It's included under submitted document PD11, and it's referenced under modification MO141 and refers to supporting text paragraph 18.63. It may erroneously be identified as 16.63, but it is 18.63. And it introduces new text under land ownership stroke delivery. Small 6, landowners must work in partnership and in accordance with a master plan to ensure the appropriate co-location, phasing and balance of employment and other uses across the site in line with policy DM3 brackets master plans and comprehensive development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the site allocations in the West area. Unusually for me, I finished early for a change. So we shall adjourn until 2 o'clock, where we can consider the East area allocations. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. It's 2 p.m. and time for me to open this hearing session on matter 19, the East Area allocations. For those of you who haven't met us, I'm Caroline Malloy, and this is Dr. Rachel Bust, the inspectors jointly appointed to hold the examination of the Lewisham local plan. Can everyone hear me okay at the back there? Just a reminder to make sure mobile phones and any other devices are switched off or on silent. Could you also ensure that your microphone's muted if you're not speaking, just to avoid any disturbance, and also just to try not to get your laptop too close to the mic because it can result in interference. And from experience so far, you do tend to need to sit quite close to the microphone to ensure that full audibility is achieved, particularly as we're being live streamed by the council. Does anyone present have any objections to the live streaming? Could the council just remind us about any housekeeping arrangements, please?
Yes, there's no further planned testing of the fire alarm. So if the fire alarm goes off, it will be a real fire alarm. We'll vacate the buildings using the emergency exits, which are clearly signposted. The rendezvous point is at the Costa Coffee on the Broadway, just outside at the back of this building. Toilet facilities out the door to the left, and then refreshments across the seating area.
Thank you. Just in terms of the procedure today, the hearing session will take the form of a structured discussion, which we shall lead based on the agenda and matters, issues and questions. Just to check, does everyone have a copy of the agenda? We will try and bring you in at the relevant point, but if you do wish to speak, please put your nameplate on edge. I'm sure you're aware of this, having attended sessions before. Just a reminder that we have all of your representations made at the Regulation 19 stage. So this is not an opportunity to present any further evidence beyond that. And also just a reminder to respect all parties and allow everyone to speak and finish their points. The session will run from 2 p.m. today and will finish no later than 5 p.m. with a short comfort break around 3 o'clock. Does anyone have any questions at this stage? No? Okay. Just to say a few words about how the site allocation sessions are going to work. We will be testing the deliverability of sites in these sessions against the MPPF and PPG definitions of deliverable and developable. And the council is keeping the housing trajectory updated at the end of each session, which will feed into the matter 15 on housing land supply tomorrow. So if nobody has any further questions, can I ask participants to introduce yourselves, starting with the council, please?
David Syme, Head of Strategic Planning at Lewisham.
Angela Stewart, Principal Policy Officer at Lewisham.
Good afternoon. I'm Karol Jakubczyk. I am the council's planning policy manager.
Good afternoon. I'm Bruno Moore, Head of Town Planning for Sainsbury's.
Good afternoon. Sean McGrath from WSP here to support Sainsbury's.
Thank you. Just in terms of the objectives and vision, we don't have any further questions on that. Just to be clear, we have obviously the written statements of the council and other participants. and where we don't ask any further questions on particular policies or aspects. That doesn't mean to say that we don't have an interest in those. It just means so that we are satisfied with the answers provided to the MIQs, and obviously we need to make best use of hearing time. So where we don't have any specific questions, we'll move on. So from bearing that in mind, we don't have any further questions in terms of the vision and key spatial objectives or the overarching policies LEA 1, 2, 4. We've seen the council's response to those, and we are happy with the response. So we'll move straight on to the site allocations. We're doing a bit of a double act today on those. So I shall hand over to my colleague who will be starting with LEA 6, Southbrook Mews.
Okay, so site allocation 6, we'll just come to the council first. In terms of the background and how the capacity was identified, please.
This site was identified internally through our no stone left unturned approach, looking at opportunities for intensification, and in response to optimizing site capacity, but also the London Plan Policy H1. This site is currently in use as single-storey employment sheds, albeit there is a large portion of it which is vacant at the moment. We felt it was a good opportunity, given its proximity to Lee Station, the railway station, to provide intensification suitable for the surroundings. We've applied a density assumption, looking at its character standard urban PTAL2 of 145 dwellings per hectare, and ensuring that the employment is re-provided at 33%, which results in an uplift of net residential units of 23 and just over 800 square metres of gross employment floor space. I think it's worth saying this is one of these sites where we haven't had any developer interest through the local plan process, albeit we haven't had any objections either to the site, but we've indicated it as deliverable within year 16 of the plan period to reflect that lack of engagement.
And is there a difference between the existing and the proposed employment floor space? Is it exactly the same?
It's pretty much exactly the same, yes.
And in terms of constraints for this site to bring it forward, would you see it as a single phase site or multi-phase site?
A single phase site. It's relatively small. Yeah.
And how many landowners are we dealing with?
Just the one.
And are there any infrastructure requirements or costs or other constraints to work through to bring the site forward?
No significant constraints over and above those which we've mentioned in the past, which can be dealt with through the development management process. it's adjacent to some locally listed buildings. It's within an air quality management area, but nothing that isn't or couldn't be resolved through the development management process.
And in terms of viability, and what did the council used? Is it a typology that's on the list?
We've looked at typology 10 as the most appropriate small mixed use.
So in terms of year 16, and you said that you've not had any contact with the landowner, no discussions to date. So the council feel that that's a realistic place to pop this site into the trajectory.
I think as per our previous conversations, obviously we do believe that it is a development opportunity. It is developable, but clearly we haven't had any initial discussions with the landowner, and therefore we've put it in that year 16 bracket.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn over to site number 7, Mayfield's Hostel on Burnt Ash Road. And the current use, according to the plan, is 26 existing specialist accommodation units. So are there current occupiers at the moment? And bringing the site forward, what would the plan be for relocating or reproviding?
No, that isn't the existing use. It's vacant at the moment.
So the background to this site, please.
Yeah, so since submission, this now has a planning consent as of February of this year for 46 residential units. So it's a council-owned site. There was a planning application that had been previously approved on the site, which was lapsed. The site was reconsidered, and as I said, a consent has been granted in February of this year. And we are looking to discharge the conditions. In terms of the programme, I'm not 100% sure of the start on site, but I do know that it's expected to be a 2-year build period for the site. We're just firming up when it's actually going to start on site. We would expect it to start on site, being kind of cautious next year sometime, and then a 2-year build program for the site.
And in terms of viability, to make sure this one comes forward early on.
Sorry, I'm just getting it. It's a combination of target rent, affordable housing, and shared ownership. The council has the funding in place to deliver it. My colleague Angela has a timeline for delivery, which is supposed to be June 2027. Obviously, there are grant agreements in place essentially for when that money has to be spent. So June 2027 is when it will be complete.
So how long is this you said the site's vacant, and it was because it was the plan that says 26 existing specialist accommodation units. That's where I picked it up from, and then you said it was vacant. So has it been vacant for a while?
I believe so, yes. If you bear with us, we can probably get that information to you. But I understand that it is vacant at the moment. We can certainly confirm that with our housing colleagues.
Thank you. That would be helpful. And as the council's got funding and we're looking 2-year build, and June 2027 is mentioned, there are no concerns with viability for this particular site.
No.
And the plan tells us that the a full application has lapsed. Do you know the reason why that wasn't brought forward?
Yeah, the previous application was looking at fabricated units on the site as means of delivery. The council reconsidered that option for a number of viability reasons, essentially, and then developed a new detailed application and submitted that, and it's now been approved. I am just conscious that I said 46 units, and I've been kicked under the table, and Angela is she has 64 in her trajectory. So I may be getting confused between the two applications. So if the inspectors would just bear with us in terms of the exact figure. Yes, it's definitely 64, I'm being told. We've referred to the application.
And you mentioned the 2 year build period. So would it be sensible to have the trajectory to sort of split those across the 2 years that you imagine that it would be delivered with, or leave it as one figure?
I think it's a single phase, but the build program is for 2 years. Yeah.
You mentioned 64 there, but the trajectory's got 65. That's a very minor thing, but
Yes, that was the 65 was an error on my part, so it is definitely 64.
Are there any particular infrastructure requirements for this site to be brought forward?
No, it's a fairly discrete site. There's no significant constraints or infrastructure requirements. I think there's a few mature trees towards the front of the site which have been factored in terms of the planning application.
Yes, and that's picked up in development requirements, isn't it? The retention of existing mature trees and also positive frontage along Burnt Ash Hill. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to site number 8, which is Sainsbury's Local and West. Any modifications?
A single modification, so that's identified in the addendum that was submitted to the examination on Thursday. And that falls under modification reference MO 310. That adjusts the net number of residential units from 21 to the corrected figure of 64. It's shown as 65 in the addendum, but as we've heard, many thanks.
Thank you for that. Let's move on to site number 8, Sainsbury's Local and the west of Grove Park Station. So just in terms of the background to this site to the council first, please.
This was a site first identified within the London SLA, albeit as having low probability. We have obviously reassessed all of those sites through the process. We have had landowner engagement with that. There are a number of ownerships within the site, including TfL that have the bus standing plus a car park, which is generally vacant towards the rear of the site. There's an Esso garage, and then the main complex, retail complex, which has a Sainsbury's Local and a number of local shops. I think it's fair to say that the buildings are tired, and again, of an age that one would expect. They're coming to their natural end in terms of their life cycle. It's also, as a local centre, an opportunity to look at intensification immediately adjacent to the railway station. So we believe it could come forward as a comprehensive piece of town centre redevelopment. There are some constraints in terms of the re-provision of the bus standing area that would have to be considered through any kind of comprehensive redevelopment. Nevertheless, we think it's a good site to intensify and improve, provide improved accommodation, town centre accommodation with residential above. The density assumptions that we've applied, it is a fairly high PTAL, albeit it is in a suburban kind of location in terms of its character. So that generates a density of 115 dwellings per hectare. We've applied a ratio of percentage mix of 75% residential, 5% employment, and 20% main town centre uses. That provides a net residential capacity of 78. Gross employment floor space of 362 and town centre floor space of 1,449 square metres. Those figures generally reflect the quantum of town centre uses that are on the site at the moment. So it's effectively a like-for-like replacement.
Are there any particular infrastructure requirements or costs that are involved? You mentioned the bus stands and there's a petrol station on site. I think that there's a desire to retain the trading of that petrol station on site, at least in the short term.
In the short term, yes. Obviously, in terms of petrol cars, etc., we are expecting those to be kind of phased out in the future. But in the short term, I think there is a need here for that petrol station. And then obviously we've engaged with TfL through the process. They've commented on the site, and there is a need to provide some re-provision of bus facilities within the general vicinity. My understanding is that there is a car parking area which is vacant at the moment, which there is no requirement for, but there will be some bus standing that is required.
In terms of that bus stand, should it be? I notice it's in the development guidelines number 1, where it talks about the bus stand as in operational use. Should that be a requirement of the site rather than just a guideline?
Yes, I think so. I think that's the general approach that we've taken. So yes, it should probably be a development requirement. We can make that suggestion.
It's just looking across the development requirements. You've also got in development requirement number 3, consulting with TfL to investigate the options for the existing bus station. So they're sort of together, aren't they? Do we need a guideline and a requirement? Can we just have one requirement, perhaps?
Yes, we could combine those into one requirement. Yeah.
And in terms of the viability and the deliverability of this site, what does the viability report say?
I mean, we've categorized this as typology 12 mixed use. Again, I think it's fair to say that because of the different components or different elements of the scheme, there will be some elements of this which are more viable than others. But we've taken it overall and applied the typology 12.
And how many land ownerships have we got for this one?
I think I'd have to come back to you on that one. I think we've got TfL as a principal landowner. We've got Esso, the garage, and then obviously we have the parade of shops. It's within that section that I'm not sure in terms of the land ownership.
So in terms of bringing it forward, would this be a master plan approach with phasing that the council would envisage?
Yes, I think we'd have to look at a kind of phased master plan approach, potentially using the TfL land, albeit accommodating the bus standing in some shape or form, and using that as the first phase potentially.
And the effect on Sainsbury's during the development.
Again, obviously, we'd want to retain, where possible, Sainsbury's as a valuable town centre retail store. I'm sure it could be phased in such a way that we provide a suitable size store within that area, and then phase it in such a way that we can continue trading, etc., on that store.
And in terms of guideline number 4, there's reference to an artistic colony. What's the background behind that one?
I believe this is in relation to the neighbourhood plan, which covers this area, which has been adopted. Again, forgive me, I don't know a huge amount about the artistic colony, but we can have a look through the neighbourhood plan and get back to the inspectors on that one.
Thank you. So in terms of the time frames, I think it's listed, further along in the plan period, isn't it?
That's correct, yes. It's in year 16 of the plan.
And is that due to the potential complexity of multiple landowners and the ability to bring all of that together into a comprehensive redevelopment scheme?
Yes, so it's reflecting the multiple land ownership. It's reflecting the garage and the landowner's expression that in the longer term he could see his site being redeveloped, but not in the short term. I think it's also fair to say, obviously TfL have a number of sites across Lewisham and across London that they're bringing forward. This hasn't necessarily been one that's been discussed for redevelopment in the short to medium term. So we felt erring on the side of caution with this one was probably most appropriate.
Okay, thank you for that. That one.
Right, back over to me now. Moving on to Sainsbury's. Oh,
Sorry, all I was going to say in relation to reprovision of the store, I think in terms of the Sainsbury's local and west of Grove Park Station, given that this is a convenience store, there would be other opportunities within the area to refurb the store off site, so it wouldn't necessarily be any kind of blocker to the redevelopment of the site coming forward.
okay, thank you. Moving on to site 4, Sainsbury's Lee Green. Could the council just explain the background to the allocation, please?
Yeah, so this is a Sainsbury's store with associated car parking in Lee Green district centre. In a London SLA 2017, it was excluded from that because it was functioning as a superstore. However, given the adoption of the London Plan, and in particular London Plan H1, which directs local plans to consider these sites, particularly single-story retail with associated car parking for comprehensive mixed-use redevelopment. We think it is an appropriate site to redevelop in the longer term. We're also mindful that Lee Green will be undergoing transformation with the Lee Gate shopping centre being redeveloped in the near future. So this with Lee Gate and then the site across the road, which we'll come on to, seems like quite a good opportunity to provide consolidated town centre uses with an increase in residential capacity across the town centre. We haven't had any pre-application discussions as of yet, so we have used a sort of mathematical density assumption that we've applied elsewhere. In this respect, it's a town centre, it's an urban setting, and it's a PTEL of 3, which generates a density of 170 dwellings per hectare. We've looked at the site's land use mix of 62% residential, 5% employment, and 33% main town centre uses, primarily to re-provide the main town centre floor space, albeit I think we're still short, having discussed that with Sainsbury's. But the idea there would be to, if we can work out the phasing, to re-provide an appropriate store on the site. Yes, and as I said, that then leads to 111 net residential units remaining on the site.
Thank you. So the council's used the sort of standard density assumptions. I am aware of the representation from Sainsbury's, who point out that the existing store has a gross floor space of 6,672, if I've got the figure correct, and are therefore concerned there could be a net loss of main town centre uses. It sounds as though there may have been some discussions since then, but if you'd like to update me, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, with regard to other conversations that we've had on the site, I think when we had, prepared the Regulation 19 document, we were thinking about efficiencies in terms of store sizes. Now, obviously, we've had the kind of discussions previously with Sainsbury's on the Bell Green store. From a council perspective, obviously having Sainsbury's and a food store within the town centre is obviously a huge positive, and we'd want to retain that. I don't see any reason if the numbers are wrong and Sainsbury's are effectively saying they require that floor space, then we can certainly up that in terms of the town centre floor space.
It would seem that both figures are gross figures, and that there would be a reasonable reduction in floor space. I know in terms of previous discussions, it was assumed that there would be some efficiency using floor space more efficiently. Is that something that could be done within the figure in the local plan, or do Sainsbury's feel they still need a higher figure?
I think that our preference is to replace the current floor space. I think it's a fairly efficient store. It is upgrade in terms of warehouse and shop floor, so there aren't that many opportunities for efficiencies within the box.
Sounds as though the council's amenable to re-providing the floor space within the allocation, but what effect may that have in terms of the residential units, albeit I would anticipate those would be above ground floor?
Yes, they would be above ground floor. I think obviously we're going to probably talk about net residential units. Obviously, the net residential units is an indicative capacity, as we've discussed previously, on the basis of being consistent with our methodology. In terms of a mathematical approach, if we were to increase the main town centre floor space without a change to the result, without a change to the density, then there would be a slight reduction in net residential units on the site.
I believe Sainsbury's have concerns about the number of residential units as well.
Yes, we do. And also, I think it's about this mathematical calculation, because I think the way the number of units is calculated, it's based on, I think the split in the evidence base is 62% residential. I think it's 62% then of the site area, which is 1.05 times 170. But if it's all going to be on a podium, you could have it across the whole site. So I think increasing the size of the food store, I don't think would necessarily reduce the numbers, because I think you would have a podium and you would be above the store. The other thing, I guess we will come on to it, is just the idea about basing on a P-TAL. I do think, particularly in a town centre, I don't think the P-TAL should make that much difference really, because people should have facilities around them. So I think you should look at it as being, as dense as you're going to get. A P-TAL of 6 or 6.5, 6A, 6B, because I do think, particularly with the concept of the 15-minute city, people shouldn't have to travel away from there. They should be travelling into centres. to use facilities. So I think there'd be sensible justification for increasing the density anyway. And I think the big ticket thing I think for Sainsbury's is there's got to be enough units there for them to think it's worthwhile, it's going to be viable. I'm sure you come on to viability. There's got to be enough units there for them to say, actually, we will, have the disturbance of trade. It's going to be worth us doing it. So I think that the figure of was it 111 or it's just too low a figure. So I think it would have to come up if it's going to come forward. It would have to be higher.
Sainsbury's have suggested 250 units, I think.
Sorry, say that again.
Sainsbury's have suggested 250 units.
I think we set up to, in the original reps, I think we set up a maximum or up to 500. So I think it'd have to be a design-led approach. So I think it would have to be a higher number. I mean, it is, I think it says in the representations we put in, if you look across the road at the Leagate Centre, there's a lot more for a site that's a similar size. There's a lot more housing put forward on it. I think, looking through it, I think Sainsbury's 170 dwellings per hectare. I think the Leagate Centre is 240. I think that's how it's worked out. And I think even then, those figures, the more housing there is on there, the more viable the scheme is going to be.
I'd like to give the council the opportunity to come back on those points, but the point about how you calculate this percentage split, is that purely a ground floor level? How does the council calculate that?
It's a kind of standard methodology that we've used across all the sites where we haven't had pre-application discussions. So what we've done is taken the land use split and then calculated that on 170 dwellings per hectare. But I do agree in terms of on a practical level, on a design level, the increasing the floor space with the units above as a design-led approach, may very well work. But it's just about having a consistent approach, particularly on those sites where we haven't had any pre-application discussions. It may very well be that, and I, again, I would expect that 111 net residential units to be exceeded through the design-led approach. But again, it's just about within a local plan context and without any evidence of that design-led approach. We've used this approach, which is consistent across the local plan. I don't necessarily disagree if we look across to Leagate Shopping Centre, albeit it is it's 1.9 hectares as opposed to 1.05 hectares. So it is of a more significant scale, but the planning application that's been approved for that is 562 units. So it is, in terms of the density, it is probably higher than we've applied for the Sainsbury's Lee Green site. But as I said, we take the view that we have to be consistent in our approach across all sites. So it'd be difficult to see what the justification would be, unless we have on occasion applied judgment and sensitivities to sites up and down. So if in relation to Forest Hill, for example, we did push the character of that area up to increase the density of that of that site on the basis that it was immediately adjacent to the railway station and it didn't have any particular sensitivities around it.
aware that that's been carried out in either direction, hasn't it? In terms of either upping the density or lowering the density, bearing in mind the potential density on Leagate Shopping Centre, which we'll come on to. You know, does the council consider this scope to increase the density at on the Sainsbury's site within the number of stories that's earmarked for that particular location?
I think ordinarily I would say yes. I'm just conscious that we have got a Grade 2 listed building adjacent to the site. However, again, it is a fairly large site, and there are other areas which are less sensitive in terms of scale. So I'm not sure I would. I'm not sure I'm in a position or I'm able to agree to that at the moment, unfortunately. I would say maybe if we can take that away and consider that and consider whether there is an appropriate increase in terms of the assumptions and what that would theoretically do in terms of the scale and density of development. I think the Leagate might be a useful cue in terms of the densities that have been approved for the site, albeit I'm just conscious that there is a 15-storey element of that Leagate which may not be appropriate for the site given there's a Grade 2 listed building immediately adjacent to it. I think, apologies, that's a long-winded way of me saying, yes, I think we can take this away and reconsider the density, looking at the London-wide SLA density assumptions. And if we do a little bit of work, we can see whether or not that would be appropriate or not.
So Sainsbury's are suggesting a minimum, I guess, of 250 units, but potentially up to 500, which if Leagate Shopping Centre is a larger site and that's looking at around about 500 units, it would seem to be quite a significant increase, the 500 units.
Yes, I mean that would be too much, definitely. You know, as I said, the Leagate is 1.9 hectares and this is 1.05 hectares. I would suggest that the Leagate application is at the top end in terms of density and scale that we would expect coming forward within this area. That is a significant step change in terms of the scale of the existing character of this town centre.
I think it's the point I would make. I mean, these things are going to have to be looked at to meet London's housing need. There has got to be in a town centre. There's got to be scope to go, and I understand there are subtleties and sensitivities because of the conservation area listed building, but there's got to be an understanding that these are the sort of locations you've got to have high density development if Lewisham and London are going to meet housing needs.
Okay, so if the council can take that away as an action point, just to review the densities on that site, sort of bearing in mind the discussion that we've had.
Yes, we'll do that.
And what are the potential adverse impacts of developing the site, and how could these be mitigated?
As we mentioned, there is an adjacent listed building. There's an area of special local character nearby as well. None of that seems like it would necessarily negate development on the site, but obviously through the design-led approach, we'd have to be aware of those. It's in an air quality management area, and we would also have to consider the nearby River Quaggy and the groundwater source protection zone through the development management process as well. Again, as I said, there's adjacent site, Lee Gate, which has very similar issues, constraints, etc., all of which have been dealt with through the development management process.
Is it actually within the area of special local character? And if so, would that impact in terms of densities, for example?
Have to double check in terms of the boundary. I'm looking at figure 6.2, but it's slightly unclear when you zoom in as to whether or not the whole of the site is included within the area of special local character, or it's just the Grade 2 listed building and the associated buildings next to it, which are in the ASCL. Yes.
Whether it would impact in terms of potentially constraining densities and design, etc.
That's something that we'd have to consider, yes, if we were considering increasing the densities.
Any potential highways impacts or improvements or requirements which may impact on the scheme?
I think we're not clear as to what the local impacts would be, obviously, but dealing with the Leagate application, we know that there has been a number of improvements to the A20 and the Burnt Ash Road as a result of the or negotiations through the Leagate application. I imagine that there might be some localised improvements required again through this site as well. But clearly nothing strategic.
Yeah, I think the development requirements allude to some potential improvements, I think, don't they, in terms of certainly the Healthy Streets corridor and strategic cycle routes and things, and permeability through the site as well into the town centre. Site's flood zone 3, is that the entire site?
Sorry, we're just bringing up the flood risk exceptions test. Apologies, the internet speed seems to have ground to a halt, so doesn't seem to be downloading or opening up. Yes, the flood risk assessment, exceptions test identifies the site as flood zones 2 and 3. So some of it is within flood zone 2 and 3, but partially benefits from flood defences. It has been subject to the flood risk exceptions test and has been satisfied. If the inspectors would like to see a plan, then we can provide that after the session.
Yeah, it's mainly just in relation to how it may affect deliverability or costs in terms of bringing the site forward, really. So it's more from that perspective. I appreciate it's been through the sequential and exceptions test, but it's just in terms of any potential constraints or costs in terms of deliverability.
Could can we take that away and consider that, and then bring that to the table tomorrow in terms of the viability?
The residential development's likely to be on the upper floors anyway, I suppose, isn't it, in terms of most vulnerable uses. Any other potential infrastructure requirements or costs which may affect viability?
None as of yet that has been identified, no.
In terms of land ownership, is it just purely Sainsbury's?
Yes.
In terms of viability, obviously, we've heard from Sainsbury's about their sort of desire to increase densities on site to make the site more viable. Has a specific viability assessment been done, though, to inform that judgment? I'll come back to the council in a minute in terms of the whole plan viability.
I don't think any work's been done. I think it's just from doing other schemes in London where Sainsbury's know what sort of you need a decent amount of housing to make it viable. Do you want to add anything?
I mean, we are actively on site in a number of schemes in London with regards to at Hendon particularly. We're bringing forward 900 units and Ladbroke Grove and various other places. So there is kind of quite a lot of background with regards to detailed viability work with schemes at various stages in the planning process.
And in terms of the whole plan viability assessment, I don't think it's a specific site, is it? So is it done as a typology?
Yeah, so I think we consider it under mixed use typology 13, albeit we have modelled a larger Sainsbury's site within Belgreen, Lower Sydenham. But it would be considered under the typology 13.
So that would show some degree of viability, but sort of tailing off towards a higher level of percentages of affordable housing.
That's correct, yes.
And in terms of timescales for bringing forward the development and how the council envisages the site coming forward, clearly, I presume it would be Sainsbury's intention to try and continue trading on site, for example. So presumably in the car park. So, you know, how does the council foresee the site coming forward?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got it in the trajectory at the end of the plan period, albeit if Sainsbury's want to bring that forward, then we'd be happy to have those discussions through the pre-application process. We did envisage that continuous trading would apply here. The use of the car parking for a temporary store and then the redevelopment of the store itself, and then a phased approach to the delivery.
Car parks somewhat smaller than, say, Belgreen, you know, in terms of accommodating a temporary store. Is that realistic? Can Sainsbury's see that working out?
I think it'd be all in the design of the store. We have done mixed use developments in the past where we've traded from a temporary store, actually a temporary structure on site during the construction process. And at the moment, Hendon and I previously referred to, we're currently the store has remained, but we're trading with a much reduced car park on site as well at the time during the construction process. So there's a number of things we can do to accommodate redevelopment on the site.
And the site is shown as being in years 11 to 15, as opposed to post 15. Is that realistic in terms of, you know, it's not the easiest site to bring forward with needing to provide the existing store? Would that timescale be realistic? Starting with the council, come to Sainsbury's.
I mean, from a council perspective, and again, I'm sure the participants will have their view, but you know, the fact that it's in a single ownership, the fact that there is a surface car parking, which could then facilitate continuous trading, and the fact that we have obviously strong development activity within the area with Leagate coming forward in short order. We feel that, you know, years 11 to 15, we have got it towards the end of that, but doesn't seem unrealistic to the council.
Sainsbury's point of view?
I mean, I think, you know, it's already been mentioned, but the site is within single ownership with Sainsbury's, subject to, you know, sufficient density being secured on the site through good design. I think it could come forward. Yes, within sort of earlier within the plan period.
And if the site is allocated, would that give Sainsbury's greater certainty to move forward? You know, what time frame would Sainsbury's be looking to bring it forward if it were allocated?
I think again, if the allocation were to provide sufficient confidence with regards to density on the site, then we would start looking at it immediately. You know, it comes down to viability as far as Sainsbury's are concerned. We're actively involved in looking at our estate right across London with regards to mixed-use redevelopment. There's nothing sort of from our point of view in relation to us being averse to redeveloping stores where the numbers stack up effectively.
So years 11 to 15 would be, you would see that as being quite realistic.
I'm just conscious that we might have to have a look at that in terms of splitting it into two phases, given the we've essentially just put the 111 into year 15, but I think we would anticipate a kind of phased delivery, particularly with the kind of the temporary store, so we could reflect that within our numbers.
Any modifications?
My apologies, I misheard. There are no modifications proposed for this site allocation.
Any further points on that site before we move on? Okay, thank you. Move on to land at Lee High Road and Lee Road.
So site 5, land at Lee High Road and Lee Road. This one has a background in London Schlar with a low probability, but the council has reassessed it and it's now got some residential units on it. Is there any change to the floor space from existing to proposed?
In terms of the non-residential floor space, there is very little difference in terms of main town centre and employment floor space. It's broadly like for like.
And what are the adverse potential impacts of developing the site?
We've looked at the physical site constraints. We've carried out the flood risk exceptions test, which was satisfied. It is adjacent to the River Quaggy, so there is some sensitivities there. Again, there are some locally listed buildings, and this site is within the area of special local character. So again, that would need to be a consideration. In terms of the development potential, or in terms of the strategy, the main bulk of the site is essentially the car dealership. There are some rather fine buildings, albeit they're in a fairly tired condition at the moment, but they're fine buildings on the corner, which contribute positively to the character of the area. So we'd be looking at how to complement any re-provision would have to be sensitive to that heritage, those heritage assets. We've taken again the density assumptions relating to the site's character, town centre, urban, PTEL3 of 170 dwellings per hectare, which gives a kind of net residential unit of 55 units on the site.
And in terms of flood zone 3, is the site likely to be all flood zone 3? Has the document launched itself, or is that something that you need to check?
I would need to check, unfortunately. I think the maps are grinding the internet to a halt, unfortunately.
Yes, because it's a similar question to the previous site of what impact does that flood zone have on the developability of the site and how it could be brought forward.
Yeah, as a town centre site, we'd be expecting non-residential use on the ground floor with residential above, which is likely to mitigate that impact. Albeit we can come back with additional detail once we've seen the mapping.
Thank you. That would be helpful. And in terms of the land ownership, developer interest for this particular allocation, please.
Yes, there's been no direct contact from either of the landowners. There are two broad landowners in the main kind of developable area, two car ownerships. We have not, as of yet, had any contact from the landowners.
And how does the council expect this site to come forward? Is this another master plan site that you'd want to address the constraints and the designations through that site-based process?
This is another area similar to Forest Hill and similar to Belgreen Lower Sydenham, which the council has suggested a sort of overarching development framework would be beneficial. I think these areas, given that Leagate is coming forward and has established the kind of design principles for that site, it could be on a site-by-site basis, although some coordination would be beneficial. With this particular site, it's probably beneficial that it plugs into a wider framework, but given the scale of the site, could come forward independently just following the development guidelines and requirements.
And this one's in the trajectory for the post 15 years, so 5 units in 2039-40.
Yes, that's correct, and that's reflective of the lack of engagement by the landowners. I would say though that we do anticipate obviously the transformation of Lee Green through the Lee Gate development, and what we've seen certainly elsewhere within the borough is that tends to sharpen the focus and bring developers into play and landowners into play that aren't necessarily engaged in the process until they see development happening in the site next door.
But in this particular site, are you taking a cautious approach and leaving it in the trajectory where it is?
Yes.
And the 55 units, you'd anticipate that being a single phase.
We would, yes.
Anything else on this site? Any modifications?
There are no modifications proposed for this site.
Thank you very much.
One of the problems of doing a double act, I'm not always sure who's going to speak next. We were thinking that it might be a good time to have a break, just for maybe 15 minutes, to return at say 20 to 4. We don't have many sites to go. Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to take views on whether participants want to just keep going or to have a break. It's we've got Leagate Shopping Centre, and then we have the 2 sites under construction, which I don't really have many questions on. So Okay, thank you. I think it made sense to just crack on and hopefully finish these sites fairly quickly. In terms of Leagate Shopping Centre, which has already been touched on to a degree, there has been a little bit of a history of planning applications. There's reference in the application being submitted 2022. So is that now being determined, or is it still sort of a resolution to approve at this stage?
Yeah, so it's still a resolution to grant at the moment, but the Section 106, I'm assured, will be signed either this week or next week. And we are working with the developers. Our economic development team are working on the relocation packages or strategy for the existing tenants to the first phase of the site. So just to be clear, there are essentially two broad phases of the site, which follows the effectively the existing structure on the site at the moment. The northern part of the site, which is effectively a triangular donut of development, is the first phase. So the strategy is to relocate the businesses from there, either within the second phase of Leagate or elsewhere, and then demolish that and redevelop, and then move on to the second phase, which is the southern portion of the site.
Is there a sort of phasing plan, so as part of that 106?
Yes, I think that there's a phasing plan as part of the application, which we can provide the inspectors.
So the local plan refers to the 2014 application. What is actually proposed as part of the 2022 application?
In terms of the net residential units, it's 562 net residential units. We're just double checking the non-residential floor space for that application. It's rather complicated. I've got the planning statement open at the moment, which breaks it down into component elements of town centre uses. So there is 690 square metres of flexible commercial floor space, use class E, A, B, C, D, G1. A community centre, 264 square metres. Supermarket of 1,000 square metres. Restaurant use, 308 square metres. A medical facility, 800 square metres. Gym, 400 square metres, and a public house, 284 square metres. What we can do is we can provide you with a consolidated figure after this session, which just pulls that together in terms of town centre uses.
That would be really helpful, thank you. So the site's in two land ownerships. The council own part of the site. Is the who owns the other part of the site, and presumably the council has been in discussion with them during the course of the application.
Yes, so the developer has an option over the entire site. So yes, we've been working with the developer for a number of years to bring the site forward. And as I said, the council is working proactively with the developer at the moment in terms of the relocation strategy for some of the businesses.
And obviously there have been previous applications which haven't progressed. Does the council feel confident that this application will be taken forward on the ground?
Yes, I think we're in a much better position now, and obviously discharging conditions and working with the developer to relocate businesses is a good sign in terms of moving forward with the application. I think also the nature of the uses is such that the previous application included a rather large format retail supermarket essentially. And when that fell through, it was very difficult to effectively reconfigure that. Whereas with this, the scheme that we have at the moment, it's a much more flexible scheme in terms of the occupiers. I know that there is interest already in terms of the supermarket, which is a much smaller supermarket, so they have got interest in that, and obviously there's a number of existing uses that we want to relocate back into the scheme as well.
So the supermarket could be something like a discounter, you know, a smaller store, also kind of a metro kind of store, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's around about 1,000 square meters, so it's not a large store. I'm not sure if it's public knowledge who the operators are that's interested, so I will refrain from saying that.
Presumably any constraints will have been resolved through the course of the planning application. Just in terms of time frame, let's rapidly mop that up. In terms of the trajectory, how does the council see the site coming forward?
Yeah, so we've got that in two phases, which reflects the phasing strategy as it's coming forward. Our intelligence at the moment and through the kind of developer through discussions with the developer is that years 4 and 5 is our estimate in terms of when that will be complete. As I said, the developer's keen to crack on. We're keen to crack on as well.
Yeah, it's still quite ambitious, isn't it? Given that there's still need to discharge conditions, relocate existing users, etc. So it does still seem relatively ambitious.
It's the latest intelligence that we have from the developer and council departments that are working on the project.
And do you have anything in writing? It's a statement of common ground on this site. Just obviously with being in the 5-year supply, there needs to be greater certainty the site coming forward.
We'll have to double check to see if we've got a statement of common ground on this one. But we can double check. We're just trying to see if we've got a statement of common ground with them. Having looked through it, we're not sure. As I said, it is a resolution to grant. We are going to sign the Section 106 agreement. So it would meet the definition in terms of the PPG within the 5-year land period. But we can double check with the developers in terms of the timescale.
And in terms of any net loss or gain in main town centre uses, I think I have a note there would be a slight loss.
Yes, that's correct. There would be a loss of town centre uses. At the moment, there is quite a high degree of vacancy within the existing building, and therefore that is being kind of rationalised. Obviously, that's being considered as part of the planning application and considered through the determination of the scheme.
The high level of vacancies, is that due to the kind of national retail market, or the kind of the quality of the retail units on offer, or a little bit of both?
I think it's probably a bit of both.